All right, guys, so welcome to the weekly current events and election 2020 update. I'm Akash.
And I'm Fatma.
And we're excited to get started. So as always, make sure to follow Fileable on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. You can get up-to-date information on everything we're doing. We have a bunch of streams every week, as well as they're going to start releasing like study guides and stuff like that next week. As you guys probably know by now, all of our content is now free. So if you sign up for Fileable, you can access any of this content. And I'm sure that will help you in all of your AP classes that you're taking. Before we get started, if you guys want to, you can answer the poll just about like what current event has caught your eye the most over the past week. I know there's not a ton of variety on there just because we just haven't heard much because of how much coronavirus is dominating the news. But you can just answer the poll there. This slide is going to come back at the end of the stream, but it's just a weekly calendar of all of our streams this week. So on Mondays is our our English, stats, and our current events update. Then on Tuesdays, we have like our social studies and humanities, so psych, human geography, and Gov. And then on Wednesdays, we have like our science classes, bio, and APES are this week. And then Thursdays, we have our history, so world, a push, and Euro. And if you want to take a picture of this at the end, it'll be back there. With this, we wanted to highlight specifically our AP Gov and AP Lang teams. So the current event stream is a partnership between these two, both of these subjects. So Mondays at 8:30 will always be the weekly current event stream with Fatima, Brandon, and myself. AP Gov will always stream on Tuesdays at 9 p.m. So tomorrow at 9 p.m. there's going to be a stream on social policy. And then AP Lang actually streams before this stream. So they stream Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern. So next Monday, they will be talking about synthesis body paragraph. So if you are taking AP Lang, please tune into that stream next week. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be talking a little bit more about some political current events that are happening, including how coronavirus is impacting American politics. So more about the peace agreement between President Trump and the Taliban, and then a little bit more about a new Obamacare case that has emerged over the past few days. Then Fatima will be talking about the election 2020 update. So first, about coronavirus. So like I said before, this has probably been the thing that has been dominating the news the most. President Trump held a press conference on February 29th after the first death due to coronavirus in Washington state. A lot of these deaths have been linked to a particular nursing center in suburban Seattle. So far, all of the deaths in the United States from coronavirus have all come from Washington state and all basically somewhat associated with that nursing facility. So right now, although there have been cases reported nationwide, I know there were some reported, I believe, in Florida today. And then I know there were some reported in California, Rhode Island. So they are on the East and West Coast. However, there are now 101 cases reported nationwide. 45 are from that cruise ship where like a bunch of people were infected, and those Americans on that cruise ship have now come like back to the United States. So that's a significant portion of like the 101 cases that are counted for the United States count. Additionally, 3 Americans that were repatriated from Wuhan. Those people, I guess, were residing in Wuhan or were staying in Wuhan, and then the American government brought them back to help get treatment for them in the United States. And then there were a few more that they got the disease through travel. I believe one had traveled to Iran where the coronavirus is spreading, and then one may have been through China or Italy, one of those two, and then a few more from people that they contracted the disease through contact with another person. So if you've heard in the news, like the main way to avoid it is just not get into contact with someone if you know like you have the coronavirus. So that's why a lot of times when one of these cases pops up, like they have to examine everyone that the person has been in contact with within the past like few days. So I know in Washington state, there was one student that has been infected that I believe was a high school student. So now that high school is closed through Wednesday or Thursday while they make sure that the people that were in contact with him don't exhibit symptoms. So a little bit more about the political response. Vice President Pence has been appointed the person that's in charge of combating coronavirus. He said that there's going to be higher or more strict screening procedures in place for people coming from high-risk countries. This includes Italy, Iran, China, obviously. Iran is kind of like a unique case. I believe one of like their top like government officials has now died from coronavirus. So it's been spreading across Iran and Italy, especially in terms of the Middle East and Europe. I know like with Iran's government, I know the person, like one of the legislators or something, he held a press conference and he was like coughing and wheezing during the press conference. So that really worried the public because, it's like a public representation of their country. And this guy is like completely sick. So that's kind of, you can see how much it's impacting public perception of government and how something that's, has nothing to do with like politics, such as coronavirus, something very science related, it's a disease, can impact politics and economics so much. Vice President Pence has come under criticism for his handling of the HIV outbreak in rural Indiana. Apparently there was a major failure during his administration in Indiana to direct enough funding to public health when that outbreak happened. I believe it was like mostly among like rural farmers in Indiana. However, many feel that coronavirus should not be politicized. So it shouldn't become like a political issue where people are fighting about who's right and who's wrong in terms of the political spectrum. Instead, just trying to make sure that everyone, regardless of political affiliation, is like protected and safe. I know additionally with the CDC, there has been some controversy. So the Center for Disease Control, originally they reported to the president that the person that was infected was a woman, but it ended up being a man. And then after that, there has been some controversy with like the test kits they sent out. Some people said that the test kits that were sent out from Atlanta, those might have been infected with coronavirus. So a lot of times, like at this point, it's really good to make sure you're paying attention to the news closely, but not trusting everything you see as soon as you see it. So that's something that you can tie straight back into AP Gov and like public opinion, just making sure that you don't like grab onto like journalism that's like very, like to the minute. So like things that are updated, they might not be accurate. Like, if you look at something that was updated like 2 minutes ago, probably isn't the most accurate information. So make sure you analyze like a variety of sources before coming to a conclusion about anything, especially something as big as this. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is something that's kind of been overlooked, but it is very important, and it could be significant for many military families here in the United States. So Trump has said that the 5,000 U.S. troops that are in Afghanistan, or at least 5,000 of them, would leave Afghanistan by May, and that he would meet with the Taliban leaders in the future. Additionally, under the agreement and kind of like almost a peace deal that Trump's subordinate has signed, the Taliban militants have agreed not to allow Al-Qaeda to operate in any areas that the Taliban controls. Additionally, the U.S., like just to like give context, the U.S. has been in Afghanistan since like a few weeks after 9/11. So that's like almost 19, 20 years that we've been in Afghanistan. So this has gone on for a long time. The Taliban were ousted from power, but they're still active across the country. So they're still like prominent in several regions. They do have some kind of control in those areas. The agreement itself says that not only does it provide like a baseline for a peace agreement, it also provides a basis for a prisoner exchange. So 5,000 Taliban prisoners and 1,000 Afghan security force prisoners would be exchanged as part of this deal. Additionally, the UN would lift sanctions against the Taliban. And however, like the negative and downside to all of this is that many activists in Afghanistan feel that this could worsen the situation for women in Afghanistan. It's already pretty bad there, especially in terms of education rights and just like being mistreated, even like in public. Many women and many activists in Afghanistan don't feel that the Taliban can be trusted with such an agreement, and they feel that exchanging all of these prisoners and stuff like that, it could just lead to worsening conditions for women and children, especially in those areas where the Taliban are so prominent. So the next thing we're going to talk about is kind of back here at home with Obamacare. So recently, several lower court rulings have found that the Affordable Care Act's individual mandate is unconstitutional, and the justices of the Supreme Court have recently announced within the past few days that they will hear the case to determine the bill's fate once again. So this has kind of come to the Supreme Court a few times by now, but again, this is supposed to determine whether the act is constitutional or not. Specifically, what the Affordable Care Act does is that it extends coverage to those that were uninsured prior to its passage. Its main popular provision is that it allows adults up to the age of 26 to stay on their parents' plans. And additionally, it protects those who have pre-existing conditions. So before Obamacare, a lot of people were being denied insurance coverage because of their medical histories. Obviously, they couldn't control that. However, Obamacare kind of makes an exception for that, and it protects those with those conditions. However, it is being challenged again in court because of this individual mandate. And then we will see in the next term of the Supreme Court what happens with the act. The next few things are just a few domestic and international events that are occurring in the country. So in terms of the technology side and economic side, Apple has said that they will pay $500 million to settle a lawsuit over slowing down older iPhones. So this has kind of been something that you could probably even relate to if you have an older iPhone. That's kind of been settled now. Additionally, stocks are coming off their worst week since the 2008 financial crisis. So last week was pretty bad for the stock market. However, today the stocks did rebound sharply, and it's kind of like a huge contrast because the Dow logged the biggest point gain in history. So last week it was like the worst week since the recession in 2008, and now today the Dow Jones had their biggest point gain in history. So kind of shows how our stock market can continually change over time just within a period of a few days. So last week, the main reason why it went down was because of fears of coronavirus. Obviously, China is an integral part to the world economy. So because their economy is suffering because of coronavirus and having people sheltered in their homes, along with several other countries like Hong Kong, South Korea, the U.S. economy was suffering too. However, hopefully today's rebound is a sign of progress. Additionally, with some key international events, the Israeli election exit polls project that Benjamin Netanyahu is in the lead. So this is significant in terms of the Middle East and policy in the future there. Additionally, in the sports world, Maria Sharapova announced her retirement from tennis. So she was involved in some controversy with like drug scandals and stuff like that in terms of like using unauthorized substances in terms of her playing career. So she has finally announced her retirement from tennis. Additionally, in terms of sports, the Tokyo 2020 Olympics are threatened due to the coronavirus outbreak. So the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, as well as the government of Japan have kind of been collaborating to see what will happen. They're hoping to make a decision, I believe, by April or May in terms of if the Olympics will proceed. Obviously, the coronavirus is a big threat, and even athletes don't really want to risk their health to go to the Olympics. At this point, I do remember seeing somewhere that if they canceled it, it was just likely going to be canceled, and then we just kind of like skip this like rotation of the Olympics because they didn't want to like hold it in like a bunch of different places, and it would be very difficult for a country to kind of reorganize everything and get ready for like this huge affair within like a matter of 2 or 3 months if they were going to move it to another country that maybe isn't dealing with struggles from coronavirus. So that's just kind of something to think about how like why these implications can be from a disease. So next, Fatima is going to talk about the election 2020 update.
Okay, yeah. So you guys have probably been hearing about Super Tuesday a lot in the news if you've been keeping up with it. So we're just going to break down really quickly what Super Tuesday is and why it's going to be so important. So Super Tuesday is actually tomorrow. It's when a third of like people living in different states are going to be casting their votes. And so it's 14 different states, 1 U.S. territory, the American Samoa, and Democrats that are living underseas. They're going to be having their nominating contests, right? And so that means that there are 1,357 delegates that are up for grabs. And so that's around a third, a little more than a third of all of the delegates that Democrats can gain in their like nominating convention. And so as of now, even though we've been talking a lot about like Iowa and New Hampshire, only around 4% of all of the delegates have been allocated. And so that's actually something that's really interesting, right? Because there's a lot of like in the news, you hear a lot of talk about momentum and how all of these states, like whoever wins Iowa and New Hampshire is like definitely going to be the nominee, right? But those states only account for like less than 10% of all of the delegates that candidates like can get in the first place. So that's something really interesting to consider. And so the important thing about the 14 states and like territories that is going to be voting tomorrow is that these states are very diverse. They're not like early states like Iowa and New Hampshire, which are like majority white. Like states like Texas and California have like a lot of people who are Latino who are living in those states, right? And so there's also like obviously way more diversity in all of those states than there were in the early ones. So this is sort of like going to be a good gauge of how Democratic candidates will be doing with people who are of like from minority communities. And so as of right now, Senator Sanders is considered to be the front runner. And so he's expected to do the best in terms of Super Tuesday states because he's been having a lot of organizing, especially on college campuses, that's been like taking place in order to support him. So he's sort of like already built this infrastructure. And so former Mayor Bloomberg, who you guys might remember was on the debate stage for the first time, like in this past debate, he's also going to be on the ballot for the very first time. And so he spent hundreds of millions of dollars on ads in these Super Tuesday states because he decided not to participate in the early states like voting and caucuses. So that means he's really counting on like a big win coming out of Super Tuesday in order to gain some momentum so he can be a viable candidate going forward, right? And so like he spends so much money on ads that I literally don't even watch TV. And one day I randomly turned it on and he was on my TV screen. And so I live in Texas. And so, yeah, that's one of the states that's going to be voting on Super Tuesday. So that's how crazy like he's like been able to like fund himself. And so that's actually also one of the criticisms he's facing because some Democrats in the field are saying that he's trying to win this election by just buying it. And so we'll see what happens tomorrow night when all of the results start coming in. But that's what Super Tuesday is. And so on this next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about what happened in South Carolina. And so South Carolina's primary just happened very recently. And so in South Carolina, former Vice President Joe Biden, he got his first primary win in the state. And so he got around 48% of the vote. And so like a very big chunk of it. And so he's hoping that momentum, and his campaign is hoping that it's going to carry into Super Tuesday. So even though Bernie Sanders was considered to be the front runner before, South Carolina kind of makes it seem like Joe Biden like has a fighting chance. And so in the earlier states like Iowa and New Hampshire, he wasn't doing so great in terms of results. And so what happens Super Tuesday kind of might decide the fate of his campaign, right? Because if he's able to like win a lot of the states, it shows that he has a lot of like momentum going forward and he might win the nomination. But on the other hand, if he loses like all of the states, that's not exactly great for his campaign. And so one of the main reasons he was able to do so well in South Carolina was because Congressman James Clyburn endorsed him. And so he's a very prominent figure within like the African American community. And so some of the exit polls that were taken after people voted showed that Congressman Clyburn's backing was like important to around half of the voters in the primary. So that just shows how even though a lot of people don't consider endorsements nowadays to be as important in their decisions, they still carry a lot of weight with a lot of different voters. And so endorsements in this case really did make a difference in helping former Vice President Joe Biden like be able to do as well as he did in the state. And so because of how well he did, he also got a lot of different endorsements from establishment Democratic figures. And so Senator Amy Klobuchar, former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg, they both dropped out and endorsed him because of how well he did, and also because they're like running as more moderates, and Joe Biden is also running as a moderate. And so other important figures who endorsed him were Jennifer Wexton, and so she's a representative from Virginia, and Barbara Boxer, who is a former California senator. And so this just shows how just even one state can kind of push your campaign forward and allow it to have like a fighting chance. And that's exactly what happened for Joe Biden. So on that note, we're going to talk a little bit about who endorsed Joe Biden and the Democrats who recently dropped out. So the first one we'll talk about is Senator Amy Klobuchar. So she is a candidate who was showing and running as being incredibly tough. And so that was kind of her brand. She announced she was running for president in a blizzard. And so she was showing candidates that she would like be tough. She's the candidate who can like beat Trump, right? And so she finished third in New Hampshire, but her campaign was lacking a lot of momentum. And so she wasn't doing as great as her campaign expected she would be doing. And so she dropped out and decided to endorse Joe Biden. And so that's because Senator Klobuchar, Joe Biden, and former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg, they were all kind of vying for like a similar electorate, like people who were more moderate. They were looking for someone who would be able to like unify the party and make sure that they could like defeat Trump rather than like someone who is like more progressive. And so the second person on that note who dropped out was former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg. And so he also endorsed Joe Biden. He came fourth in South Carolina. And so even though he was able to win the Iowa caucuses, it became clear that whatever momentum he had essentially run out. And so he decided that it was time for him to end his campaign and throw his weight behind the person that he thought has the best chance of defeating President Trump. And so he decided that was Joe Biden. And so the last person who we'll be talking about is businessman Tom Steyer. I promise I know how to say that word. So he was a billionaire who was running for president, and he spent almost $200 million on ads nationally. But they didn't really pan out at all because he didn't earn any national pledge delegates. And so it was very obvious that all this money like wasn't really working. And so when he dropped out, he decided not to endorse anyone, but he did say he will support whoever gets the Democratic nomination because beating President Trump is the most important thing to him. And so the last thing that we'll be talking about, as you guys know, in these past few weeks, we've been trying to integrate a Senate race and put a spotlight on one in a different state that seems to be competitive. And so this week we'll be talking about Maine. And so the reason why we're talking about Maine is because the current senator, Senator Susan Collins, she, for a very long time, has claimed to be a moderate and independent voice in the Senate. And so that was part of her appeal, right? And so now that's sort of changed because Democrats are trying to spotlight the fact that she voted to confirm Justice Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. And that was like pretty controversial, especially among Democrats. And so she also voted to acquit Trump in the impeachment trial. And so she said something along the lines of, I think he's learned his lesson. And so Democrats are really hoping that these actions, especially in like recent times, will allow people to like realize that she's not as moderate and as independent as she has claimed to be. And so that's what Democrats are trying to argue. And so especially when she voted for Kavanaugh, that was something that really angered people within the Democratic Party. And so there was a crowdfunding campaign that happened that raised $4 million for whoever her future opponent was. Like, people literally did not even care that there wasn't like somebody who seemed to be like the Democratic nominee for like that Maine Senate race. They just wanted like whoever it was going to be able to like have a fighting chance. So the person that it seems like is going to get the Democratic nomination is the current state house speaker in Maine, whose name is Sarah Gideon. And so she's currently running to challenge the speaker. And so in these like in the past month, she became the first 2020 Senate candidate to get enough signatures to qualify to be on the ballot. And so that's actually not something that's easy. Like, a lot of candidates, they just pay a filing fee to get on the ballot, and they don't even bother to like collect all of these signatures, because it can be like really difficult to mobilize enough people to actually like get out there, volunteer, and get enough signatures to get her on the ballot. So it's pretty impressive that she was able to actually build a campaign and an infrastructure that allowed her to get on the ballot through signatures. And so right now, there are some polls out there that show that she's tied with Senator Collins. And so there even have been quarters where she's also outraised the incumbent senator. So it's not that she's like completely unknown because she's like the state house speaker right now, but it also shows that like as an incumbent, like Senator Collins doesn't seem to have like a complete advantage in this situation. Especially because there's a fairly well-known figure that's running against her, right? And so that's it for today. We'll see how these 2020 elections shape out. And so, like Oculus said earlier, the weekly calendar is going to be back up, so you guys can take a picture of it. Tomorrow, he'll be back talking about social policy. And so I hope you guys tune in for it. And there's also going to be a bunch of other streams this week that you guys can tune in for. And so, yeah, from your AP Gov and your AP Lang teams, thank you so much for tuning in tonight, guys. And if you don't have any questions, we'll be signing off.
So Brandon has a question. How likely do you think that the Democratic presidential nomination goes to a contested or brokered convention? Personally, I think that tomorrow will kind of decide what happens in terms of between, really right now, it seems like between Biden and Sanders. If Sanders is able to win a majority of the states tomorrow, especially Texas and California, I think the chances, like Biden's chances, are definitely a little bit lesser. Like, they're going to be not as great as they are right now with his momentum after South Carolina. But I don't know, Fatima?
I mean, yeah, I agree with that. Like, not in the game of like predicting anything, but I don't know. I think we'll just have to see what happens.
So does anyone else have any other questions? Or anything about Fiveable, AP Gov, AP Lang, any other AP classes, the schedule? Like, we're here to answer any of your questions about Fiveable. So if you'd like, you can drop them in the chat. Otherwise, thank you for coming.
Okay. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Bye-bye.